15 days to the NFL draft. It is S&L, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Subscribe, like, ride along. All podcast platforms here daily at 4. Big draft news coming up later on in the week. We got the Super Stream as well that will be taking place 2 weeks from Manana. The draft stuff is intensifying. I kind of want to jump right into this. Last year, there was a viral moment of CJ Stroud when Ricky Pearsall was drafted, where it was very clear CJ Stroud loved Ricky Pearsall. And that seemed like a guy that he was interested in getting. Don't know whether that was a possibility or not, but he clearly loved Ricky Pearsall. Who do you think CJ Stroud's draft crush is this year? Now, it's probably going to be either someone blocking for him or someone catching passes from him. But who do you think CJ Stroud's draft crush is this season?
And this one's pretty easy, isn't it? Like, CJ Stroud wants to play football with Emeka Egbuka again from Ohio State. Like, that's got to be one of the draft crushes, is having his guy Emeka Egbuka back out there, knowing what he's capable of, trusting him. That's got to be the draft crush. Like, I know, there wasn't a wide receiver that played with CJ last year, so Egbuka has sort of an advantage over those other guys, but it's got to be Egbuka. His familiarity, he likes the guy. They're both very strong and public about their faith. It'd be a big boost for the Bible study crew in the building. Like, it's got to be Egbuka.
I think it's definitely like Egbuka and Travion Henderson are probably the easy guys to mention, and guys that he knows very well, and guys that had good things to say about him at the combine. I do wonder if maybe CJ Stroud likes someone like a Luther Burden.
That would have been my second guess.
Yeah, the Luther Burden situation is interesting because you've kind of started wondering, like, is Luther Burden someone that the Texans should look at? I know today that the Beast came out, Dane Brugler, one of the most anticipated draft resources during the process. And he actually has Burden over Egbuka, which I think is extra interesting because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Dane's an Ohio guy. So he's very well connected in Ohio. I think he probably follows Ohio State closer than anything else. And he is an Ohio guy. And I think he usually has the most information about those guys. And if you look at the Beast, there's like the information, the in-depth info goes even more in-depth than it already does. And it's already extremely elite. So I did find it interesting that he had Burden ahead of Egbuka, and he had both of them in the first round. So he has 5 wide receivers if you count Travis Hunter going in the first round. And the Burden thing is interesting because last year sucked for him. Like, I think he only had 10 catches of over 20 yards, which is just kind of unheard of for someone of that talent. There were a lot of changes going on at Missouri. They weren't as good. And you
don't mince words. That offense was awful.
Yeah, it was trash.
They were terrible. I mean, and he suffered for it.
And the other thing is, this time last year, we were thinking that Burden, like, if we were doing a way too early draft, like, we're talking about him as like a top 10 guy. Mm-hmm. So you look a little bit closer at Burden and some of the stuff that may or may not have happened. There's maturity stuff, but not like overwhelming maturity stuff. I heard yesterday on the All City Dallas, because they had a Burden breakdown, and I wanted to hear what they were saying. Clarence Hill said maybe he doesn't practice as hard as you would like someone to at this point. The tape kind of says that. There've been like some mental hurdles, but it's not like a character thing or anything like that. Like, there's no questions about his love of the game. It might just be natural maturity that he needs to overcome. So I think the Burden thing, the closer you look at it, is interesting. And I could easily see CJ Stroud, because this was the original question. I could easily see CJ Stroud seeing what Burden does when he's at his best and being somewhat intrigued by what he can do and what he could possibly do.
Yeah, the 2023 season for Burden, and it's worth noting, in the midst of a crappy season, he was still all SEC, for whatever that's worth. There's a lot of options in SEC, but back-to-back all SEC. 2023 was awesome. He's one of the best football players in the nation that year. And I know there's some, like, you mentioned the maturity. If the guy just needs to grow up a little bit, that's fine. He's going to enter a locker room that should allow him to grow up pretty well. And you've got good examples and good leaders.
Yeah.
You'd hope in that locker room. And the D'Amico Ryans, like, there's a lot of trust that you would place in D'Amico Ryans to make sure a guy's sort of dialed in and focused. So if it's a maturity thing, that's less scary than if it's like a personality problem. Like, okay, I know I've mentioned before Luther Burden. Oh, well, he kind of quit in the Alabama game. Well, they were getting their head kicked in. He's good. The other 10 guys, 9 of the 10 guys with him stunk on offense. They had to gimmick getting him the ball in 2024 because they couldn't trust the offensive line outside of Mimbu. So it's like, I understand being a little frustrated, and it almost kind of like, can I sell you on it being sort of a Joe Mixon approach? Like, damn, this thing should be way better. I should be playing way better. We should be playing way better. And you sort of get frustrated that way. Like, I can kind of feel that. You can sell me on that with Luther Burden, that, like, he cares too much, and that's why he gets pissed off about things. Like, okay, the ability on the football field, like, it sort of speaks for itself. The questions are, is there growth to it, and what's between the ears?
Yeah, he was the number 3 recruit in the nation, behind Travis. Travis Hunter was in front of him. So he's been kind of that dude for a while. Another interesting thing, I saw McMillan actually acknowledge that he needed to grow up heading into this year. So we go back to that clip. There was that element as well when it comes to what he's got to figure out and how that whole thing works. Later on in the show, I actually have a nobody's talking about that I brought up yesterday about these Iowa State wide receivers. And it's an interesting connection between those guys and the new offensive coordinator. Does it matter? Who knows? But I think the Texans might be getting some in-depth information on those dudes. But I could see CJ liking Luther Burden, but the Ohio State guys, I think you're probably right there, and assuming that he probably likes those dudes.
Yeah, I would think so. And the long-term Ohio State guys, not the showed up recently Ohio State guys. So not Simmons, not Judkins, but Egbuka, Henderson, guys like that.
Yes. Something else that I noticed, an interesting element of this year's prospects, and I'm just through a couple of, I'm halfway through the receivers. I didn't read about the quarterbacks, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But I think this is an interesting element of these guys and their development and their maturation and all that. This is kind of the face of like the COVID impact of recruiting and kids. So I've noticed that like the recruiting stuff is a little bit like all over the place, where some of these guys are 3-star guys and they have offers from like Alabama and freaking Georgia or something like that. And then a lot of these guys, like, they had their senior football seasons like just completely wiped away. So we've kind of put COVID in the rear view. But when you're going back and you're looking at what these kids had going on in high school and college, this is the COVID impact class. And I think as a result of that, you might have some like guys that were maybe a little bit behind development wise when they got into college. And that can kind of explain some of the inconsistencies that you see with some of them, because I couldn't imagine like if my senior year got cut short or if I wasn't allowed to, fully develop. Like I think a big part of developing into college is your senior year, where you're enjoying what got you there, and then you're kind of moving into the next phase. Like these young men being teenagers and having to go through all that, you kind of see it when you see kind of the analysis, and sometimes there's almost like mystery spots and all that with some of these guys, and some of them ended up at maybe even smaller schools than they would have had that not ever happened.
Yeah, because you got to think about what 2020 ahead of your 2020 season, like you probably got the entire offseason robbed from you. So there probably wasn't a lot of team workouts getting ready for the fall. And so guys who didn't have commitments or weren't already committed probably – this is among the most impacted by COVID drafts that we're going to have, because you got guys who've been in college a lot longer because of the extra eligibility that they were afforded. And then you mentioned the guys that had key moments in high school affected by COVID. So this is probably the most COVID affected draft,
no doubt,
from like guys left over, as well as effects on the younger players who are now older players here in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too with Higgins, where Higgins was kind of a guy who was mainly focused on basketball.
Jaden Higgins from Iowa State.
Yeah, Jaden Higgins was extremely focused on basketball, and he started liking football and paying more attention to football kind of junior, senior year. Well, that kind of is right there in the COVID mix. So if you're not early on, if you're not on the recruiting radar in football and you end up kind of picking it up late, that's how you end up at Eastern Kentucky, and then you go to Iowa State. So there was kind of that element with Higgins as well that I thought was interesting, because he's kind of a guy that I've started paying a little bit more attention to, Higgins and what it looks like. I actually did a mock draft yesterday. I posted the video on my channel where the goal was get Higgins or Burden, and it actually ended up being a pretty good draft. Ended up getting Higgins on the trade back, but he's kind of a guy who's, don't know if they like him at 25, don't know if he's going to be there at 58. So that's kind of where they're at the wide receiver, and it feels like that's the same thing with Burden. So that's just kind of where they're at right now at receiver, and maybe Ibuka is or isn't there, but who knows?
Today was the first day I read somebody putting Ibuka on the Broncos, and I was like, now I got to worry about the Broncos drafting him too. Like, so the argument was really good. It was like, hey, like Denver's got their outside guys. They could use a guy like this on the inside at the slot, blocking really well. They get their running back later in the draft, and they're off to the races. And I was like, okay, now I got to worry about another Ibuka landing spot in Denver.
I wonder this. I brought this up earlier, and we want to get into the quarterback CJ Stroud versus perhaps his biggest competition in a sec here on S&L. 15 days away from the NFL draft. But I have kind of a nobody's talking about when it comes to the Iowa State wide receivers, and we don't know like how much of an impact Nick Caley has on the decision making. Like, do they trust Nick Caley enough to where they're going to let him basically make picks? Like, is Nick Caley going to be the offensive voice? I don't want to say there's no pushback. There's always going to be pushback, but is with his offensive system and D'Amico not being as familiar with it, and hell, Nick Caley might not know what the hell he's going to do at this point. He's talking hybrid and stuff. I wonder how much of an impact he's going to have on the decision.
I am fascinated how what the input is from Nick Caley, because the way the Texans talk about it working is their scouts and all those, they do all their work, and then after free agency, that's when you start feeding things to D'Amico Ryans, to the rest of the coaching staff, like the NFL coaching staff, where they then kind of put their eyes on, hey, these are guys that fit us. You know, don't even think about looking at this guy because he doesn't fit what we do. And then you start to comb through there. And I do wonder what the weight is of, like, hey, Nick Caley really loves this guy, even though he spent a few weeks looking at him, versus, you know, this guy that spent, you know, the better part of a year and a half looking at him. But Nick Caley's the offensive coordinator. That guy is a regional scout or an area scout or whatever. Like, who matters more? I would think Nick Caley matters a lot in the process. So I would think as a coach, you've got to sort of temper and not fall in love with too many guys and ignore the work that, you know, the lifetime scouts have done. So I think that's a very interesting, like, how much does he get added into the process? How much does D'Amico Ryans get added into offensive players in the process? Because he's the head coach. He needs to look at everybody, I would think, at some point. Like, oh yeah, no, I'd have trouble stopping this guy, so I like him as an offensive player. It's hard to weigh who has the impact in the draft room, and that's hey, good. That's what you could pay Nick Caserio the big bucks for.
Well, the other thing is he doesn't know a damn thing about this system. So that's the other thing. And I think Caserio kind of stepped back because he didn't know a damn thing about the Shanahan system. So now Kaylee's bringing whatever the hell his system's going to be. We think it might be a combination of New England and Rams, and we don't know what the hell that's going to be. But I bring this up because, like, when it comes to the Iowa State wide receivers, I'm assuming that part of the process will be like you talk to their head coach, their college head coach. Like I would think you would try to get like some sort of information, develop some sort of relationship. Nick Cayley and Matt Campbell dynamic, I think, would be interesting because they grew up within 7 miles of each other in Ohio. They went to high schools that were 7 miles apart. They're 3-year difference between them two. But when one of the things that it was really like the only time that you really saw Nick Cayley show like serious emotion was when he was talking about what he always wanted to be growing up, which was what? You heard it. Like he wanted to be a high school football coach. He wanted to be a football coach. He loved Ohio. He shouted out Josh McDaniel's dad. Matt Campbell's dad happened to be a high school football coach 7 miles from where Nick Cayley grew up. So
they had to have cross paths in some way, shape, or form, like playing against his dad or coaching or had a coaching clinic or something.
So I'm not saying he's like going to do some sort of favor for him or something like that. But if there is any information like about the Iowa State receivers that maybe Matt Campbell wouldn't offer up like in depth to like someone he didn't have a close relationship with, I think that he's going to have as much information as possible. And if Matt Campbell's in love with, say, Knoll or Higgins or something like that, I do wonder, like, if Nick Cayley kind of naturally falls in love with it. Because if you hear these Ohio guys when they get in the same room together and they start talking about football and high school and all this crap,
it's Ohio's football mafia. They're all connected.
So I do wonder, like, when he does talk to Matt Campbell, first of all, it might take him like 30 minutes before they actually get into the prospects. But I do wonder what that dynamic is, what kind of information he can get, because that ain't no small thing. At the very least, there's going to be some good small talk and some bonding when you idolize high school coaches. The guy's dad is a high school coach 7 miles from where you grew up, and y'all grew up around the same time. Oh, you played them in your district? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just wonder, and I'm starting to become kind of sold on Higgins a lot. And the other thing I found interesting is I watched the Steve Smith video about Higgins. And it's kind of funny because he's so high on him, but he's still 7th or 8th on the list, while McMillan, who people would say he's not high on, is 2nd. And I think this kind of goes back to the standards that you kind of set for yourself. Or maybe it's the fact that none of these guys have the feels of like the Brian Thomases, the Jamar Chases, the Marvin Harrisons, to where you naturally fall in love with the second tier guys just because you don't feel like the first tier guys are there. It might just be a different type of, just a different type of something to keep an eye on, different type of dynamic.
I like Higgins. He was really good for the Cyclones. He did everything he needed to do at the Senior Bowl. He's one of the guys that came into the Senior Bowl with eyes on him, high expectations. Let's see what he could do. He checked all the boxes as with a target on his back in the practices. So I like Higgins. And I love the way he talks about, like, I'm going to be a red zone weapon. And I'm just like, too many big guys get small in the red zone. And he's like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go win in the red zone. I'm going to win jump balls. I'm going to win over the middle in high traffic areas. And the Texans were, of course, horrible in the red zone last year. So a lot of that was play design and the O-line.
That's his thing. He runs pretty good routes for his size. And he's also someone who can line up inside, outside, all over the place. Swarm into the soup. You ain't never Swarm. Birdie Boy on the super chat says, say Booker is this year's Will Anderson Jr. and say Ibuka is this year's CJ. Can you see a scenario where they draft one and trade up for the other? I actually can. Like with these two guys, I would think you would have to get Ibuka first, but I could see either one of these guys falling into the second round. very easily see that. But it might be a little bit expensive and it might not be something they want to do. But I could see a scenario where both of these guys are there at 25 and maybe one of them falls into the second round. I could very easily see that scenario.
I'm fascinated with the Tyler Booker conversation because there's a portion of the NFL that just is not going to be interested in him because he's not athletic enough. And then the other half of the other portion of the NFL is going to be like, well, we're not going to have him go out there and run around. We're going to have him go out there and maul the guy in front of him. And if the Texans are indeed going with a little bit more of a change to their rushing attack than what they've had, Booker fits. And from an off the field profile, these are the two most Texans in the draft.
Yeah, these
are the two. Like this is DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio sitting there like, tell me more. Tell me more about how much you love football. Like these are the two most check all the boxes off the field profiles. In addition to check on the field profiles, big schools, played lots of football, leaders on their teams. Like you got Ryan Day saying, all the great things about how important Igbuka was to the championship run. You've got all the great things that were said about Booker and how he was a leader and how important it was for him to learn how to be a leader from Will Anderson when they crossed over at Alabama a couple years ago. Like just off the field profiles, they check all the boxes. It goes back to, did they fall in love with those guys? Because that's what happened with Will Anderson. They fell in love with Will Anderson, knew they had to get a QB and got Will Anderson. Did they fall in love with one of them that where they start to slip, they go up and get one of those guys? The likelihood would be Booker slips and they go get Booker. I don't know that Igbuka's slipping very far.
Yeah, Igbuka will be interesting to see how far he does slip. I think there's 100% a chance that Tyler Booker's there. And when you hear this, I actually played this yesterday on the stream, and this was at the Combine. Just him talking about why he loves football. This kind of gets a lot of people fired up. But this was Tyler Booker at the NFL Combine talking about why he likes the game so much and what his favorite parts are of football. And this just screams DeMeco Ryans, and it probably screams Cole Popovich and Nick Caley as well.
Like adversity is going to hit, how are you going to respond? And then everybody loves to play football but when it's easy, but who loves to play football when it's hard? And I feel like that's what separates the good guys from the great guys at the game of football. And then ultimately, I just love the aggressiveness and the tenacity of the game of football, like how is legal assault out there. And I love football because the brand of football that I play, I make guys not love football anymore. And I do that every down by really just giving them my all and letting them know I'm not going to let up. So the thing I love the most about football is taking the love away from other people.
All right, there you go. So, I mean, that's DeMeco.
The thing I love about football is taking the love of football away from other people. Like,
yes.
Okay, Caserio's got a football boner here in that.
Yeah, and that's kind of a I think that's the direction that they want to go on the offensive line. So to answer the question, the Igbuka Booker thing, the combo, maybe, but who knows? And he does sound like Will Anderson Jr. It's the same vibe. Which, by the way, Will Anderson Jr., the face of the swarm, according to Derek Stingley, and the first guy DeMeco mentioned, he said there's a lot of guys, but the first guy that he talked about was Will Anderson. So if you already have that, then that right there is someone to keep an eye on.
The thing on Booker, he was the Will Anderson for Alabama on offense. I mean, he's the most Texans profiled guy.
Primetime V says Titus makes guys love football.
That's one of the best jokes in a long time.
Keep going.
That's one of the best jokes in a long time. Yeah, so again, Booker is just, if you told me who are the two players that personify what the Texans draft, it's Tyler Booker and it's Emeka Igbuka.
Yeah. And Trey Henderson's up there too. But we don't know where that's going to go. They're in an interesting spot when it comes to the no man's land possibility and all that. But that's wild right there by primetime. Titus Howard makes people love football. CJ Stroud versus Trevor Lawrence. I kind of want to touch on this because the Jags are getting a lot of attention right now during this kind of cabin fever time of the NFL draft because the new head coaches get a head start where they kind of get some workouts in early on. So Trevor Lawrence, he's on his third system. He's got his new coach. He's got all this stuff going. And I just find it interesting that 2 years into Trevor Lawrence's career, there was the disaster with Urban Meyer, and then there was the playoff win. And the 2 seasons since, we've really just seen it's kind of gone downhill. And now all of a sudden there's some optimism because of a new change. And CJ's at the same point, kind of where Trevor was, where obviously you have 2 division titles compared to 1. You've had the same head coach. I do wonder what direction we're going with CJ. And I also wonder what direction they're going to go with Trevor Lawrence because they sound excited, but we've kind of seen this before. But I do think it's interesting with the 2 quarterbacks, the 2 long-term guys there, because Indianapolis doesn't have a long-term guy. Tennessee, they're going to draft Cam Ward, and we don't know what the hell that's going to mean. But I do find it interesting that Trevor Lawrence 2 years ahead of where CJ is right now, just where he is as compared to where CJ is.
Well, CJ had a much better start, obviously. And then Lawrence was much better in year 2 than he was in year 1. He was really bad in year 1, and he had a lot of challenges in year 1. But it seemed like he took to the big-time coaching that he ended up getting from Doug Peterson, and that was obviously a big element to, hey, Doug Peterson, proven guy, going to give him Trevor Lawrence. And then it's just kind of been okay. And that's a really scary thing because most teams in the NFL will pay you if you're just okay. And Trevor Lawrence makes a tremendous amount of money that he shouldn't make based off of just being okay. And that would be probably one of the worries about CJ Stroud is if he's okay, it's kind of the NFL operation to just pay the guy. I'd rather pay my guy than have to go through trying to find another one again. And Stroud's, I feel like, starting from a much better place after 2 years than what Lawrence had to deal with. So that almost kind of does that kind of increase expectations for year 3 compared to what year 3 for Lawrence. I know there was high expectations. He didn't really live up to them. There's a lot of just like bleh to his game. Like CJ Stroud can't have a bunch of bleh moments in 2025 and us feel good about him getting $58 million a year.
I think the interesting thing, like with where Trevor was, where CJ is, and that's kind of what we're discussing. Like CJ's better than Trevor right now. Like we all know that. Like it's like we've established that. But it felt like with Jacksonville, there was like an assumption that the best was ahead and it was the start of something and all this, and then it just kind of came tumbling down. With CJ, you've gone just as far. You have an elite defense on the other side. And now you have a new system, which kind of brings some unknown. But I think there's a little bit more pushback. I think there's a little bit more question marks. And maybe there should have been more question marks for the Jags. But the overall feel is, I think where CJ is right now, I actually think it's a perfect balance of an established good start to a career with a lot of question marks and a lot of reason to kind of tighten up. And really, quite frankly, a lot of adversity that hasn't quite like, it's not like he's hit rock bottom, but I do think CJ Stroud has gone through a healthy balance of success and adversity that I think almost makes him extremely way more battle tested than Trevor was. Because once the Urban Meyer stuff was gone, it was gone. Like it wasn't like you had to grind through the season last year with all the injuries. Like we can talk about how bad it was, but it was once it was done, and you were already wondering who the hell the next coach was going to be. I think there's been a nice balance with CJ Stroud of just being battle tested, having high expectations, but also having healthy skepticism, for lack of a better term. So I would say I don't think it comes tumbling down, but it is interesting looking at what we were saying about Trevor after 2 years and what we're saying about CJ now.
It is worth noting. I feel like the Texans have done a much better job both drafting and even to an extent team building around CJ Stroud than the Jaguars did around Lawrence. Like the Jaguars, they hit 3 picks in the past 3 years. Like their right tackle from Oklahoma, Brian Thomas Jr., and I guess is Trevon Walker a hit? Like
No.
He's not.
No, if you take him before Aiden Hutchinson, that's a miss.
Okay, then they've hit 2 draft picks in the past 3 drafts. Like the other first rounder, they had in 2022 Devin Lloyd. He's very okay. They had 2 firsts and 2 seconds in 2021, and those guys have not lived up to the billing. They've constantly had offensive line issues, which they are still trying to fix. And they said at the end of last year they were going to try to alter the offensive line, and they basically kept their entire offensive line. So, they haven't made it the most comfortable situation for Lawrence. That's something the Texans obviously are going through, but the Texans have far more hits in the draft as well as free agent additions that, or offseason additions that aren't draft picks. That's been much better than Jacksonville as well. Like they've been really bad at that. And so that's another element that is, I would say, puts a little bit more emphasis on exactly what CJ Stroud's going to have, because Lawrence had a fine situation heading into his 3rd season. Stroud's situation is much, much better heading into his 3rd season.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. It's interesting. It almost just feels like the slate just getting wiped clean with Trevor Lawrence, almost like they almost hope. I don't think a lot of NFL fans are doing, but they almost hope that they can pull up that Men in Black. Might be dating myself, but that Men in Black thing and just make you forget what we saw the last 4 years from Trevor Lawrence. It's just like a brand new start. And I don't think, and this is the other thing, and I think this is the same with CJ to a certain point. I know it's kind of a sensitive subject where if you say that CJ Stroud didn't play up to his potential last year, it always has to be mentioned. Well, Damn it, Bobby. Yes, I know he had Bobby Slowick. I know he had a bad offensive line. We know, but he didn't live up to his standard. I'm not going to sit here and act like Trevor Lawrence was just an overwhelming victim of Doug Peterson and what Doug Peterson was doing. I think he had his inconsistencies kind of had a little bit of a factor in what went wrong. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I'm going to give him half the pie, but he can have a couple slices. Like Trevor Lawrence can have a couple slices of that pie when it comes to blame, a much bigger slice of the pie than CJ Stroud. So I will make that very clear. He can get a couple slices.
Trevor Lawrence frequently makes mistakes that a $55 million a year quarterback should not be making. I'm talking about easy throws, deep throws that he should make, throws that he's made before that all of a sudden he can't make. Like Trevor Lawrence makes far too many mistakes for a $55 million a year quarterback.
Yep, I would agree. So I described this draft, and you know what my favorite snack is? Movie popcorn. Mm-hmm. I will go pick up movie popcorn even if I'm not going to the movies. Just one of those things. I'm a big fan. And I think this year, this is kind of a 2-part question, but I described this year compared to last as we're going from bottomless to 1 tub. Last year, you didn't have to worry about day 1. So you get the bottomless popcorn, the free refills. You're eating your popcorn the whole time. You're sitting there. You're observing. It doesn't really impact you. You're just kind of sitting there. If you don't like popcorn, you're sipping Kermit tea all the way through day 1. This one, you can get a large bucket because I think at least half of the first round is not really going to overly impact the Texans because we have a good idea who the first 14, 15 guys are going to be that leaves. But you only need 1 tub. It's not going to be bottomless because the draft is going to intensify. And I marked right after Indianapolis. That's when stuff gets real for the Texans. I think you can eat the popcorn up till Indianapolis. Indianapolis also obviously has kind of like an indirect impact on you. But I think Once we get to 15, then that's when stuff matters and that's when stuff gets real when it comes to the draft. And there's a lot of variables, but what I want to ask you in the spirit of that is, what is set in stone? What is not a variable when it comes to the Texans? In other words, like, so there's a lot of things that can happen. What do we know for sure that is going to happen when it comes to the Texans? In other words, like a guy who's not going to be there, or what they're not going to do. What do we feel is set in stone heading into this draft?
I feel like they're going to have, I'll call it leftovers at wide receiver by the time he gets to 25. Like the chances that there's multiple wide receivers for them to pick, it feels pretty low. Like I feel like it's going to be either Egbuka or Luther Burden there available for them at 25. So I feel like there's not going to be a buffet of wide receiver choices by the time they hit the clock. I feel very confident about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's set in stone. I
know they're taking a lineman. I don't know where. I know they're taking a lineman in this draft.
They're definitely not going safety. I think we can eliminate safety. Obviously, we can eliminate quarterback. I don't think they're trading up too far. I don't see them like hopping into the top 10 or something like that. But really, there aren't a lot of things set in stone with this draft. But it is interesting, just kind of the balance between, in their first draft together, Caserio and D'Amico, it was like, oh God, you got to be ready immediately. And then you're kind of done quick. And then last year, no first round. And then this year, kind of sitting around, and it doesn't get real till about halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that rolls and how it goes. It's going to be wild.
How close are we to no cornerback being set in stone?
In the first round?
Yeah.
I mean, I think as soon as Barron gets selected, I think it's safe to say. I think it's 100%. We threw out that possibility, and a lot of people have kind of thrown it out there, but I think as soon as Barron's selected, I think you can completely dismiss it.
The Barron available at 25 would be very. It could be very. I know. D'Amico Ryans has mentioned it multiple times this offseason. It'd be very Philadelphia of them, because the Eagles basically, they had a lot of their front seven built and taken care of, and then they went out there and drafted back-to-back corners last year to go along with an already pretty impressive secondary. And then they dropped Cooper DeJean down there in the slot a lot, and he had a lot of success there. And if Barron from Texas is there at 25, like, you're just building a super defense. And it's like, we're gonna cover you longer than anybody else because we got 5 guys that can cover, and our front guys are going to get to you because we believe in our pass rushers. And it's like, okay, like I know you need other things, but
it's as valuable as an offensive line. Like if it's a superpower. Like it was. I mean, 2 out of 3 of Tom Brady's first Super Bowls. Like it was the clear strength. The first one, they were ranked 6th and 6th. I did this exercise yesterday, but they were ranked 6th and 6th, so it was equal. After that, it was defense was in the top 3, and the offense kind of fell off. So, contrary to popular belief, like you can have coaching, you can have personnel, you can adjust, but a super defense is as much of an asset as a really, really elite offensive line. That's just a reality situation. That's what they would be. That's the direction in which they would be heading.
And you want, D'Amico Ryans talked about depth. You want depth? Okay, having multiple options for multiple players to play multiple positions in your secondary. Like Barron could play outside inside. Kamari can play outside inside. Petrie can help you when it's a clear running down. Like, if you want to put Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the field in there at the nickel, like you could just do so many different things with that secondary if you added another premier defender as a defensive back. And I mean, there's a very narrow, small section where I'd be fine with it, but I believe Barron's the best corner in this class. So
yeah, I think he is too. I think Travis Hunter's the best receiver, but yeah, that was just a question about the absolutes here on S&L. Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. So this came up yesterday, and we've kind of gotten on the soapbox about this. I was talking about Jaden Higgins, and I was just breaking down, what kind of player he can be, what he can do. I didn't necessarily agree with this, but I think the concept is hilarious, especially for a team that lacks talent on offense and in other areas. But I was talking about him, and I think the measurables are very similar. And I think that's where Daniel Jeremiah compares guys. I think people kind of mistake sometimes what Jeremiah says. I haven't seen him compare the two, but during the combine, Jeremiah's favorite thing to do is compare measurables, which like 40 time, height, weight, all that. The playing style, I think, is completely different. But I was talking about Jaden Higgins, and one of the viewers, and shout out to him. I'm not picking on him. This is just, because he's not the only one that says it. But one of the viewers said, "Well, is he too much like Nico Collins? Like, is he too similar to Nico Collins?" And my thing was this: first of all, I don't know that the playing style is the same, because I think he's a little bit more of a polished route runner. I don't think he's as explosive like on the field. I think they play a little bit different, but the measurables are identical. But my thing is, if he is like Nico Collins, then sign me up for it. It's the same thing that I've said with Omarion Hampton being Joe Mixon. I don't know that this team is equipped to where just because a player plays like the other guy, you ignore him. And I go back to the McVay. Like, imagine if they were having the conversation, they said, "I feel like this Puka guy's a gem, but he plays too much like Cooper Kupp." Like, you find yourself in weird territory. And the other thing is, that doesn't get enough attention. Nico Collins gets hurt. It's happened all but 1 year. So it's not like it's a dependable thing. But what do you think of this complimenting players type of thing, whether it's talking about a Joe Mixon, whether it's talking about a Nico Collins? What crosses your mind when we start talking about this?
Well, I think you got to look at the bad associated with the player or the challenges that player had initially too. It's like, I feel like a lot of Nico Collins' early challenges were he had to get back into rhythm and stay healthy, and he couldn't stay on the field to get back into rhythm. And then the initial offenses he played in, they used him like an idiot. They just said, run down the sideline and try to catch a jump ball. And then once you start running him over the middle, you let him run the full route tree, you sort of see, okay, well, this guy can do a whole lot more than, we put him in a box. Like, we actually played to his strengths as a football player. So that to me is, I think, the biggest element is like, hey, I see like, okay, like if Jaden Higgins could be Nico Collins-esque, that's great. Nico Collins wasn't awesome until his third year in the football in the National Football League. Like, he was a huge disappointment his first
year. He got a QB
year.
for sure.
Yeah. Now he finally got a quarterback and an offensive coordinator that didn't have his head between his legs. So for a year at least, well, even through the issues last year, Nico still did good. So I think you got to look at the challenges. Like, what are the like, can you use the guy right? Can he do a lot of the same things that Nico Collins does? I don't know that Higgins totally replicates what Nico can do. I think Nico's just probably a little tougher with the football in his hands and the ability to create after the catch, whereas Higgins doesn't quite have that. Physically, they're very similar. Like, the height's pretty close.
Identical. No, the 40 times the close, the 40-inch vertical is the same. Like, it's
height, weight, wingspan, arm length, hand size,
similar.
10-yard split, 40-yard split.
But he's kind of a slot guy though. Like, they like him in the slot. So that's another thing. And multiple slots will not scare the Texans. I think it's very safe to say. But but my whole point I'm making is, if I can get two Mixons or two Nicos, cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I say this all the time. It applies very much to tackles, but it also applies to the slot receiver spot until Christian Kirk gets a contract extension or his season's over. They only have Kirk for a year. So if you tell me initially Jaden Higgins is sort of a role player, plays a little outside, helps you inside, and then in 2026 he's your slot receiver, I'm in. Sign me up. Let's do it.
It also it's just kind of interesting. Maybe it's because there was so much talk of it in college, and it kind of like as soon as we were introduced to the player, it was the biggest question mark. But I mean, the way we talked about Stingley, like it's kind of the same with Nico. Like if you look at like time missed, like and you compare the two, it's kind of similar. Like Nico does not like Nico misses games. So you need depth there. Like even if you feel like Nico's the number one wide receiver, like there's always the possibility that he might not be healthy. So
I mean
that's another thing that I think needs to get a little bit more attention or at least be factored in.
Certainly. Now at this point, Stingley's played 30 some odd games in a row, so the injury concerns.
My point is it's more of a concern for Nico. That's my thing. Like we talked about it with Stingley, it doesn't get talked about with Nico. But outside of that 1 year where we don't even count the Jets game where he limped off, that's my point. Like my point is like that was like the main talk with Stingley, and Stingley missed, I don't know, what was it, 4 games, 6 games? And the 4 was because they were kind of shutting him down. Mm-hmm. So that's the point I'm making, is that it's not even as much of a concern as Stingley, and I don't think it's ever really gotten as much attention as perhaps it deserves with Nico.
No, it does, and it does deserve a lot of attention. And I guess there's a comment or two about like, oh, could he have come back 1 week earlier than he did? Even then, that's still only one more game, and he's still missed significant time with,
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, maybe he could have played the Lions game. I mean, that's
okay. So he gets to 12 instead of 13. Like that's still not great.
You also left the game at half. Like like a lot of times we look at games missed, but it's like, well, he also left. Like we look at Will Fuller. It's like, well, he also limped off the field about 5 times that we don't really count and was gone for a while.
Nico left in the first quarter of Buffalo.
Yeah, after the touchdown.
He caught the touchdown and he was done. That was the last time he was on the field.
Yeah, so
for over a month.
Yeah, a lot of times we look at the games played, but it's like, well, yeah, I mean,
that's a big positive.
Sometimes it's almost better to miss the whole game than leave the game early because the roster's effed up sometimes. Like you're like a guy who's inactive that you probably would have had active it's kind of messed up. But I'm not saying, I'm just saying that having another Nico Collins, first of all, he's awesome. So having multiple Nico Collins is good, but also like you're probably not going to have Nico Collins for 17 games. Like the odds are much against you.
And a double positive to having a Nico Collins copied skill set on another player or close to it is
you can figure it out.
Higgins gets to learn from that guy and gets to learn and watch and understand a guy that's very similar to him. Like it's always annoying when someone's like, well, Xavier Hutchinson's nowhere close to Nico Collins.
And nobody thought that. Like Xavier Hutchinson's a good day 3 pick, and we'll see what Xavier Hutchinson develops into.
And then to your point, if you don't have a Nico Collins, hey, this guy's been working on the same stuff Nico Collins does. Let's give him that opportunity.
Well, how about what the Rams' advanced stats when Puka and Kupp were on the field were elite, like beyond elite. It wasn't often, but when they were on the field at the same time, like the advanced stats, like the DVOA and everything, it was at the very tippity top of the NFL, and Nick Caley was a part of that. So you can make it work with multiple guys with multiple skill sets. So I say all that to say the complimenting thing, I don't think it matters as much, especially with where the Texans are.
Credit to the Rams for obviously what they do, but Cooper Kupp in the 3rd, Puka in the 5th.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's just, and they had those guys overlapping for 2 seasons. Like
it's crazy.
Great job by them. Yeah,
it's crazy. And maybe they can get some of that Nick Caley magic, because we always like to bring that up.
It'd be nice, man. I do feel like there's the linemen are probably the indicator, but Nick Caley's going to kind of tell us the way they're going to operate on offense, depending on some of these linemen. Like if they draft Tyler Booker, we talked about him earlier in the show. They draft Booker from Alabama. They're not running the Shanahan rushing offense. They're going to try to maul people, and they're going to run some of that Patriots stuff from a few years ago where they just line up and kick you in the teeth.
Well, what if he doesn't know? What if Nick Haley doesn't even really know what he's going to do? Not a finished product. Who knows?
Well, he's got to have an idea of where he wants to go.
Well, does he? Because I guess he does. But when you talk about a hybrid, I kind of wonder, like, with how we talk about these unknowns and these uncertainties and the fact that you're really at the mercy of a lot of variables when it comes to selecting players, I do wonder if, like, you're a little bit more open-minded in trying to make it work, you know? Like, if this receiver's here, there, I don't know. But all coaches will say, they won't necessarily do. They'll say that they're going to adjust to their personnel, which is what you would love for all coaches to do. Just doesn't always work that way. But it is kind of an interesting situation where they're calling an offense for the first time. There's really a lot of holes in the offense that you're coming into, although you have really important pieces that are already there. Most importantly, the running back, the quarterback, and the receiver. Like, you feel good about that. But then you basically gotta fill in these holes. And by the way, you're filling in these holes, but you're doing so at a point in the draft when you're kind of in no man's land. So it's kind of, I wonder how much we're really going to see him kind of adjust to his players. And there's kind of a balance, but I do wonder, like, if Booker's not there, and then I don't know. There's just a lot of unknown here.
Well, if you tell me you're going to play to your player's strengths, you draft Tyler Booker and you run the Shanahan offense with him, that's not playing to his strengths. Playing to his strengths is running.
They're not running the Shanahan offense. I think we know that. That's the one thing we know. That's not the thing.
A zone offense, I guess, is what I should say. A zone rushing scheme. You know, so
I'm falling in love with one of these running backs that I didn't anticipate falling in love with as well.
Are you going to tell us, or can I guess before?
I'm going to do it tonight on the night stream.
Oh, okay.
I'm do it tonight on the night stream.
Hell of a tease.
Yeah.
I was surprised Brugler didn't like Cam Scatabo as much.
He kind of hates him.
He does not like him, actually.
He's not even in the top 10.
Yeah.
He's not a big fan of Cam Scatabo at all. Doesn't like the lack of athleticism. Kind of feels like he's going to fumble a lot. We did see that the Texans did visit with another running back, though. Caleb Johnson was in town.
Iowa.
I'm not sure if they like. By the way, number 3 on Dane Brugler's running back list.
Number 3 for a lot of people.
Right behind Omarion Hampton. But Caleb Johnson, I don't know if they like that he's showing on his Instagram story that he's visiting Houston, but
I talked about this last night. Cowboys visits, it's almost like the Cowboys tell them to. Like, you got guys all over the Star in Dallas being like, I'm visiting with the Cowboys today. Woo! But, like, I don't ever see prospects doing it with the Texans. And then Caleb Johnson does. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, he's one of the rare ones that has. So it's like, that was nice. And then, you know, if you got keen eyes, if you're paying attention, Caleb Johnson did more than share that Caleb Johnson was in the building.
No fumbles last year.
That's a good job by Caleb Johnson. There's a lot of no fumbles guys.
200 plus. 200 plus, no fumbles.
There's a lot of no fumbles guys, and there's a lot of, like, real good ball security guys in this draft. And then there's some guys that just put it on the turf.
The word on the street is you like every offensive lineman in this draft.
That's not true. That's not the word on the street.
That's the word on the street. It's what I hear.
No, that's not true. By the way, Caleb Johnson revealed that Gray Zabel was in his visit as well.
Oh, God. Cody won't be standing up for a while.
The North Dakota State tackle who's going to play guard in the league, maybe center. But I don't like all the linemen. That's not true. I'd be beside myself if they drafted Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State. Can't do that. I don't like Donovan Jackson, the guard from Ohio State, not as much as all these other guards.
By the way, Luther Burden, man, he's been through hell.
Oh, yeah?
He's been through hell.
Last year's been through hell guy was Ray Davis, the running back from Kentucky. He lived in foster care, had to take care of his brothers and sisters while they were in foster care. And then when he eventually got the chance to play football, he had to go like away to the school to play.
Luther Burden had 9 sisters.
Well, Will
He
Anderson,
was the only boy out of 10 kids, and he was the second youngest. That is going through a hell of a lot.
Will Anderson and him got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Will has 4 or 5, right?
Will has
4 or 5. He has 9.
I think it's 5, yeah.
Yeah. Will has 5. And he's the baby of the crew. So he's basically got them looking out for him. He kind of did too, but 9 sisters.
Oof.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot to go through.
I do. We're the Dane Brugler's draft guide on all these guys. You just find some just fascinating stuff about these guys that it's like, when did Brugler get this information? Like, how did he come across this and decide
Starts right now, talks to the parents, gets it all piled in, and then bada bing, bada boom.
Like Trey Henderson's got sleep paralysis.
Yeah, sleep paralysis.
It's like, is that something you have to worry about as a team?
Yeah, it's weird because he just puts the concerns, and it'll be like missed 1 game with an ankle in 2023. So I think he just puts like nuggets. It's not necessarily concerns, but like the sleep paralysis, I don't think it's a big thing. I think he just puts like it's basically nuggets, but positives, negatives, all that. So yeah, I get it, but it's a good resource. It definitely. I'm probably going to go right back to reading it after we're off this. I'm on the running backs right now.
I looked up because something like that. It's nice, and like I would want it I looked up how much it would cost to print it at FedEx down the street.
Oh God, $50.
No, $200 something.
What? How many? Isn't it 500 pages?
It's 500 pages. But if it had 500 pages double-sided, it's like 50 cents a page. So it's like $250. And I was like, yeah, I like it, but I don't like it that much.
Yeah, this was when it was good to work in an office and you could just jack their paper and just print it all. And all of a sudden it's like stacked. Like Johnny from the sales department's coming over there. Like, oh, I'm printing something.
He won't mind. I used to do Saturdays on the radio, and one Saturday I was there early, just getting ready for the show, and I see Seth like 3 times come across like the window, and I was like, I wonder what Seth's doing here. And the last time I saw him, I finally saw a big thing of paper. He was carrying a thing of paper out the door. Seth's taking the company paper home.
Oh, the actual paper.
Yeah, he had a box of paper, which is probably 10 or 12 reams.
There was a prank at a radio station where they pranked one of the guys and acted like he was in trouble because he printed the whole Mitchell report.
Oh,
and that corporate was mad at him. So there's that. But yeah, that always happens. Who knows? Why is Stoots not a fan of Donovan Jackson? What's the scoop? Brandon wants to know.
I just like other guards more than him. And like where you would have to draft him, I like other guards better.
He's probably 25.
Yeah, like you'd have to draft him at 25. He's a really nice player in a trade back scenario. Like if you trade back, be my guest, take Donovan Jackson. But I like the idea of Tyler Booker more. I like the idea of, obviously, I love the idea of Banks playing guard for a year and then playing tackle. And I like Ratledge and I like Savanaia. Ratledge from Georgia and Savanaia from Arizona more. So I thought it was unique. More people are talking about Jackson as a tackle than like it's coming up more in the conversation. Like he only played tackle out of necessity. He's probably a guard.
Whatever.
I know you love conversations about guards.
Yeah, whatever. All right. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Be sure to subscribe.
All right. Well, in week 6, when they're letting all the pressure up the middle because they didn't figure out the guard spot, I don't want to hear you bitching about it.
No, there was a guard that I was thinking about the other day. What's the kid's name from Alabama? Not Alabama. Auburn. From Auburn. They said he's like a 5th or 6th round pick. His name's D something.
Oh, here we go. Here's the
There you go. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Subscribe, like, right along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.
I gotcha.